All right, so I'm pretty close to 12:05, so I'll go ahead and get started. My name is Laurie Eldred. I'm with the NESW Michigan chapter. That is the National Association of Social Workers. We have the large professional organization, and then every state has their own individual chapters. And then to make it even more fun, they break down the state into different regions. So I'm also the Region 4 rep, which covers Kent County, but not just Kent County. It goes Kent County, Ionia, Montcalm, Mecosta, Oceana, Newaygo, Muskegon. Oh, I think that's it. Ottawa, I think I said too. So there's about eight counties. So it's a pretty large region, but lots of us are in Kent County, Grand Rapids, or driving in to Grand Rapids, given the number of agencies and organizations that are housed in the city of Grand Rapids, Network 180, Arbor Circle. There's a whole bunch of us here in the city. So I just wanted to provide this platform for folks, those of us who are working and living, especially those of us living in Grand Rapids, to get to know the candidates for mayor. And so we're going to just let each candidate, David and Senita, just briefly kind of give us your vision, what you hope to see happen for the city of Grand Rapids. And then I've got a handful of questions I'd like to ask to get your perspectives. Just on, of course, this being a group of social workers, a lot of these will be social justice issues, or even, I'm somebody who's worked in the community as well as live in the community. And so looking at some of the unique needs within the city. So I'm going to ask about some of those as well. So I'm going to start off with Senita and just have you kind of lay out what you would like to see as candidate for mayor of Grand Rapids.
Hi, thank you so much, Lori, for first facilitating and organizing this, and for all of you for being on. I know, this is the first year that the mayoral race is on an even year. So while all the noise of DC is happening, this very important local race is also happening. And so whenever there's someone or any group that is interested in elevating it a little bit, I am grateful for that, because as I'm having conversations with voters, sometimes it's educating them that there's this race on the ballot. So thank you for hosting this today. My name is Senita LeNear, and I have the privilege of having served in Grand Rapids in elected office for a number of years. I'll start off kind of with a little bit of a bio. I am a wife of the Reverend Dallas LeNear. I'm a mother. I'm a business owner of a couple small businesses. I am a Creston Polar Bear. So if any of you are local, you know what that means. I graduated from Creston High School. And I'm a Cornerstone graduate as well. I have corporate experience where I worked for the largest healthcare insurance provider in the state of Michigan for 14 years in a variety of positions that I feel have helped me, and I utilize the skills that I learned at Blue Cross and Blue Shield as I'm serving in elected office, as well as union experience because I was a steward there at the Blues as well during one segment of my time there in the 14 years. I was on the school board. I was appointed to the school board in 2007. And I'm also a parent of GRPS students, Lori, that, I know you just mentioned that too. And so how I became civically engaged kind of at the elected level, it was really tied to me being appointed to the school board. And so there was a vacancy. My sister called, and after we were talking about it, it was on the news. And after we talked a little bit about that, she was sharing with me that I should seek the appointment. And I hadn't even thought of it. I'm not the person who, grew up thinking I wanted to become the mayor or the, president of the United States. That just wasn't my thought process. However, when she mentioned it, it was passionate for me because I would go to the conferences of my nephews and niece with their parents. And I would be the one asking a lot of questions and following up with teachers and things of that nature, just because I had a passion for education. And I knew that Nelson Mandela's quote, education is the most powerful weapon, which you can use to change the world, is true. And so when she said that, I decided to go for it. There were 15 other people who had that conversation, I guess, with their sisters, because there were 16 of us who threw our name in the hat. And but I was the one who was appointed. I was later elected to the school board and completed that term. And then while serving there, there was a violent act that took place outside of one of our school buildings early morning that caused me to start thinking about going to the city to serve on the city commission. So that's a little bit about my history. To get to your, I think, and I felt like that history is important as I'm answering some of the other questions about my vision for the city. Um, I love Grand Rapids. I've been here since I was 9 years old, and it's an amazing place to live. Obviously, because I haven't left, I'm enjoying living here. But I also know that Grand Rapids has some areas that we haven't fully addressed, and that we need to dive a little bit deeply into so that we can make some modifications so that the city's vision to make sure that it's equitable for all can come to fruition. And so why I'm running is to do exactly that, to help to change some of the cultural things that don't necessarily allow everyone to feel safe and protected while they're in this city. There are a number of initiatives that are interesting that interest me. But one of the things that I've done over the past few months is I've been hosting neighborhood connections, where I am going to different places in the community, inviting people in and just meeting them where they already gather to get feedback from them, so that I can take feedback as I'm serving as mayor. So sure, I have some ideas, and I've been doing this long enough to have some ideas that probably work really well. But I think what's most important is to have the citizens to be able to contribute to what this city looks and feels like. And so that's what I've been garnering over the past few months. And what I found is that a lot of what they are interested in are some of the same things that I have passion for. So housing, and affordability of housing, and addressing the missing middle with housing, reducing violent acts in our community, and keeping my eye on what I'm calling Grand Action 2.0, so the bigger projects that are happening downtown. And that's just to name a few. I know I've been talking for a while, so I'll stop there because I know some of the other points will come out with some of your other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. David, if you would like to go next.
Sorry about that. I'm working on, I was just in court, so I'm transitioning to, I'll get on my computer here. But I'm on the phone for the moment. So yeah, great to be with you guys. My name's David. Like Ms. LeNear, I served on school board and city commission, but I also have spent 7 years as a state representative. And coming from that to running for mayor. So my, I guess my background, a lot of you probably know, I started Four Friends Coffee House downtown when there really wasn't a lot of viable retail downtown. Started Wealthy Street Bakery and Hall Street Bakeries, and then more recently, Long Road Distillers in town. All of those businesses were in neighborhoods that were really neglected and sort of underappreciated, and so it's been fun to be part of the revitalization of some of those areas. My life's work has really been around mass incarceration, and so sorry, I'm bouncing around a lot. I'm still trying to find a place to sit, but my life's work's really been around mass incarceration. And so I was a prosecutor for 7 years, and after 7 years of doing that work, I realized that there were so many things wrong with our system of incarceration that needed to be fixed. So I really started working in a space called restorative justice that probably a lot of you are familiar with. When I was on city commission, I started a restorative justice court process in district court. When I went to the school board, there were 3,000 kids getting suspended and expelled every year in Grand Rapids. I led us to institute restorative practices in our schools. We cut suspensions and expulsions in half almost immediately. So very proud of that. Then I went to the state, and there, my big things that I'm very proud of are I wrote and got passed Michigan's clean slate legislation, which was the first of its kind in the country. 8 states have copied us now. Just in Michigan alone, that legislation has helped over 1 million people get their old criminal records cleaned up, which means they get better jobs, better housing, they can live with dignity. And also, we did it automatically. And so a big chunk of it automatically, which means people don't have to hire a lawyer. They don't have to figure out how it works. They don't have to deal with the shame of the process. So that was great. The other big thing I did, which I don't talk to a lot of people about, but social workers will get this. I cut the CPS Central Registry from 430,000 registrants to 30,000. I got 400,000, largely poor, largely people of color, off of a CPS registry. And as you all know, that registry really has been a barrier historically to social workers taking the risk of being foster parents, because if something goes wrong and you get a Category 3 case, you can lose your license. So using all Category 1, 2, and 3 cases as a reason to be on the registry never made any sense. CPS knew it didn't make any sense, but the legislation was written that way in the 90s and nobody had ever fixed it. So I got those bills passed unanimously through the House. Only unanimous legislation I've ever seen get passed other than highway naming bills. But that helped 400,000 parents, and it's going to really open opportunities for way better foster work. The reason I knew about that is because I spent about 30% of my caseload when I was a lawyer working in the abuse and neglect and delinquency space. As a matter of fact, I was walking back from court just now with a kid who was 17 years and 1 month old when he got charged with pulling a BB gun on somebody. He made it into another piece of legislation I worked on, which was raise the age. So that young man was charged as a juvenile, which means he got to go home today. And he would have had 10 years in prison probably if he had been if we hadn't raised the age. So we were one of 8 states in the country that was still charging 17-year-olds as adults until we changed that while I was in the legislature. So done a lot of work in the justice space. Now at the mayor's level, I'm absolutely, we can do better on policing than we have historically. That's a complex area. We can talk about it more since we've got some time. I have lots of ideas there and lots of colleagues, and I'm also talking to a lot of people in the community about this. In macro terms, our goal has got to be to change policing from a culture of coercion and domination to a culture of peacekeeping and problem solving. And that means a cultural shift in policing, which is not something that's going to happen quickly or overnight or easily. It's going to take accountability and patience, but that has to be our goal, and we have to name that goal. In the housing space, this is a continent-wide problem, everybody knows, but I'm convinced Grand Rapids can be a national leader on actually getting folks affordable housing, doing a lot of reading and thinking in that space, but also talking to a lot of people who have visions and expertise. At this point in Grand Rapids, there's been a lot of talk and not nearly enough action in that space. So that's something where we're going to have to really move towards action from talk. And finally, neighborhood revitalization, which is always a very granular thing, but it's something I spent a lot of my life doing, so it's something I'm comfortable thinking about. I know I've been talking a long time, but I will say the last thing, this is a little bit like stage 4 cancer. I'm convinced you have to name the problem first, even though it's tough to name it. A lot of people in our country right now don't trust the government at all. And that is a problem that transcends any party lines. We have to build a better democracy or we're going to lose the one we have. And so I am out on doors every day talking with people about clean government initiatives, more transparency in government. Specifically there, I am intending to have a weekly town hall where people can come and talk about policies called Mayor's Mondays, so that we don't have to have the scripted format of city commission meetings as the only place people can talk. And the other thing that I'm intending is a policy that requires everyone elected in the city to disclose their finances. That's not enough, but it's a place to start from. You have to be able to know where the elected official's money is, or why should anyone trust an elected official? And as far as I'm concerned, that's a sacred relationship with the voters, and we owe them honesty and transparency. So those are my priorities. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to jump into just questions. I'm going to kind of go back and forth between each of you, and just, kind of 1 to 2 minutes. I understand, we do definitely have time, but also I know a lot of these questions, very heavy topics, very complicated and nuanced. So just if you can kind of take 1 to 2 minutes with each question, give us your perspective, platform, and how you as the mayor would work on addressing this question or this need in the community. So the first question is, what is your plan to support mental health treatment in Grand Rapids? I will go with Senita first and then David.
Thank you for that question. You know, one of the things that I find the city's role is in mental health. We know that the health department is the primary, and the county are the primary governmental bodies that would address the mental health. I think that there are ways for us to engage with our citizens in such a way when they're experiencing mental health crises. And so what we found is when we added social workers to accompany our officers and our firefighters as they're going on some of their calls for service, that has been a way to reduce the number of arrests that may occur with some of the individuals that they're engaged with. It has also lowered the barrier for there to be interactions that could have otherwise become, challenging for officers and may, again, result in some negative outcomes. And so, as I think about the city's role in mental health, I think making sure that we're monitoring the data on that, and it has been, a little bit of a pilot. But what we now need to do is increase, because we're seeing that the results are positive with having social workers to be part of the work that we're doing at the city in that way. So I would say increasing social workers to be involved in our public safety programs. In addition to that, we established, while I was on the commission, the HOT team. And so the HOT team is designed to go out again with police and mostly fire, and also social workers who are part of HOT team as well, to address those persons who may be experiencing homelessness, who also have some mental health challenges that it becomes apparent that they have as the interactions are occurring. And so that's another way that I think that if we expand that, and the HOT team is working across the city, but it is what I would consider understaffed for the volume of work that exists here in our city. And then I think another area where we could continue to fund, with some of our federal dollars we receive, some of the organizations who have the mission to address persons who are experiencing mental health crises. We have been intimately involved in increasing what we're calling mental health aid. So, you have first aid, but it's something very similar with mental health aid, where families can even identify signs of when someone needs mental health. And so sometimes if families aren't aware what those signs are, things could go untreated for far too long. And so, I would love to see a program where we're doing some community-wide mental health aid, the way I'm going to age myself, but in days past, where first aid became a thing that you wanted everybody, including babysitters, to get some training on. And so let's make, mental health aid something very similar, that anyone that's in a public role should have some level of understanding of what to do when they're seeing mental health as a crisis.
Thank you very much. David?
Yeah, thanks. So this is, you're right. I mean, probably everything we're going to talk about is complex, right? So just some a macro point that I want to make is that having spent the time I've spent in Lansing, I know that a lot of this stuff really has state funding implications, and I fully intend to spend about 20% of my time. I don't intend to take any other job on when I'm mayor. And I fully intend to spend a significant amount of time in Lansing advocating on justice and public policy issues that need to get moved forward. And this is really one where funding really often trails the need. The models are often problematic, as anybody knows who's seen what's happened with Network 180 and all of that funding model recently. It's something that needs some persistent attention. I know that Majority Leader Brinks is pretty conversant on this, but one of the problems we have in the legislature is people get termed out and then the expertise goes away. So having persistent advocacy from the local level is very important, and I intend to do that. Many of you on this call probably know that we just made a 12-bed crisis unit in town, which is a great way to deal with an acute issue rather than having it wind up in the incarceration system. I'm going to do everything I can to continue to support mental health courts, which are another good diversionary, but also functionally good long-term care for people who have some really problematic issues. I have a client who I wind up having to represent about every 2 years because he goes off his meds and he decides that drinking and being on medication is compatible, and it really isn't. And I have to go back through the court system with him, and whatever he's been charged with, we have to go through it again. And when he's in mental health court, he's compliant. And when he gets off probation, we start the process all over again. So, in a perfect world, we would have way, way better long-term advocates for people who have significant problems. And that's really the vision I think we need to move to. That's one of the other conversations we need to really lift up when we're talking about the unhoused population. And the folks who are working in this, some of them at least, are very clear at pointing out, look, giving someone who's struggling with schizophrenia, for example, giving them a studio apartment and walking away isn't going to do you a lot of good. And really about 80 cents of your dollar when you're helping those folks has to be spent on support, and about 20 cents of it has to be spent on housing. So people with real need deserve to have real resources spent on their problems. Nobody chooses to have mental health problems any more than anybody chooses poor health. And those of us who are fortunate enough not to have those challenges need to act with empathy and conviction and bring resources. The final thing I'll say is there's an emerging movement, as probably many of you know, to start advocating for not just student-teacher ratios, but social worker to student ratios in schools. And that's critical because, as many of you know, a lot of these issues can become very acute, particularly in adolescence. But it's also true that the earlier you can identify mental health issues, the better the arc for helping people is. I had a kid yesterday who I represented who stopped going to school, and so he got charged with truancy. Well, really what was going on was underlying anxiety issues. So getting him to be able to be in school and not feel scared of it is the real issue, not smashing him for truancy. So it's something that we have to keep in the forefront as we're talking about all these policy issues. And it's certainly a key component of how we collaborate with the schools and how we deal with truancy in our city courts and all the other attendant issues.
Thank you, David. Our next question, and you both have addressed this and talked about this, so just will ask for any additional thoughts about the plan really to address the housing crisis and homelessness in the city. I am a social worker that's worked in the city, worked with the folks who are homeless. I drive downtown, I know it's a growing issue and need. And so I'm curious on your thoughts or any additional thoughts, especially given the recent Supreme Court ruling in Grants Pass, right? The Supreme Court recently ruled that if you're homeless, even if there are no resources in your community, no shelter, no places to go, you can still be penalized and criminalized for being a person who is experiencing homelessness. So I'll let you go first, David, just if you wanted to add any additional thoughts on what you'd like to bring as the mayor.
Sure. So if we want to talk about the unhoused for the moment, is that what we want to talk about right now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, because it's always worth remembering that's the tip of the iceberg. And so for everybody, there are fortunately a fairly small, and any number other than zero is not good. It's like talking about a small number of murders, but there are fortunately not thousands of people living downtown. There are, more than 100, but less than 500 probably, who are living out in the streets downtown right now. And it's worth remembering that there are a lot of people couch surfing, a lot of people who are at risk of eviction. And so that's really the tip of the pyramid. And it's and you always want to be careful that the tip doesn't get the most attention just because it's the most visible, or because, somebody from Ada comes downtown and says, "My gosh, I felt scared," because they walked by somebody sleeping in a doorway. There's a lot of fear that can get triggered by dealing with these issues. And when I started Four Friends Coffee House decades ago, we had a number of regulars who were unhoused, and they spent their day in Four Friends, and they were, polite and well behaved, and sometimes they didn't smell the best, but there was nothing traumatic about having those folks in our businesses frequently, and so just want to point that out. I think there are resources that we can creatively work with. One is libraries are doing a really good job on helping this population to some extent. There are also people out in the private sector doing a really good job. I think our fire stations can potentially be a resource because they're sited around the city and they're always manned, and they're manned with people who aren't armed. And so interacting with a firefighter is not the same as interacting with a police officer. And so I think that's a resource that we need. I'm in conversations with firefighters about that, and early conversations on that topic, on that front. I think it's really important, again, to name our goal. And I think we have to be absolutely clear when we start that everybody has a human right to not be assaulted in the middle of the night and to not freeze to death. And so I think Grand Rapids' goal almost immediately should be to be a zero tent city. Now, the only way you get to be a zero tent city is if you have a real better alternative. And those of us in the space know a lot of people don't want to go to shelters. And a lot of that population is struggling with addiction issues and mental health issues. And so telling them, "Gee, go to Mel Trotter," is not going to cut it. It's important that we have shelters, but they're necessary but not sufficient. I know there are other cities, and I saw this oddly enough in Halifax, Nova Scotia. The city has started buying shipping containers and breaking them into little housing units and making a little town square out of shipping containers and putting a porta potty in the middle. Now, it's not housing. It's a better alternative to a tent because it's a unit that then has a heat source. It has a steel door with a deadbolt on it, so you get safety and you get heat. So I think we absolutely need to move to a vision of being a zero tent city virtually immediately. And I think we absolutely can devote the resources to that. Now, longer term, this has to be a regional solution. I'm not interested in East Grand Rapids freeloading off of Grand Rapids responses to these issues. We have corralled a lot of our unhoused population down in a very small part of the city, and that is not an acceptable response. So there's a lot of work to be done here. But I do want to flag the Rosalind, our current mayor, Rosalind Bliss, is working hard on this and has thought deeply about it. And so a lot of this work has started, and I don't want to minimize the work that's been started. I certainly applaud it, but there's more to do.
Okay, thank you very much. Senita?
At some point, David was frozen on my end. I don't know if that was me or if it was him. So if you all can't hear or see me, just let me know, please. Thanks for the question. And, I would like to add a few things. So I talked a little bit about the HOT team and kind of their role in addressing persons who are experiencing homelessness. I'll talk about a few different programs that we implemented while I was on the commission and that I championed. One of them was and we were finding that those who are experiencing homelessness were reluctant to seek shelter in some of the shelters that are downtown. And as they started digging a little bit deeper into why they weren't seeking shelter, especially during these extreme temperature times, it really tied to them having all of their personal belongings with them. And shelters didn't allow that inside. And so one of the things that we implemented is to provide those who are unhoused with we were using the large trash bins or recycle bins with locks so that they would have some place to put their things so that they can seek the shelter that they needed when that was necessary. So, these kind of incremental things, because once you have someone getting shelter in a organization, then they may become a little bit more receptive to opening up and sharing with those organizations what's really going on in their lives so that they can get the help that they need. But first, it has to start with trust. Another thing that we did is we partnered with a nonprofit organization to provide day work, so that those who were experiencing homelessness could have an opportunity to earn a wage every day, um, without the strings attached to being able to be an employee and working, because they're transient, and one day, sometimes is vitally different than what the next day would be in terms of their schedules and availability. So there was another kind of practical, real thing that was implemented. I personally have participated in a nonprofit organization, the Black Impact Collaborative, who has provided funding for people who are unhoused, who need shelter. So, we have an arm that's called Direct Relief that provides real-time funding to people who are, part, on the prone to eviction or living in a hotel and things of that nature. So that's another way of engaging with some of the nonprofits who are providing those services. While serving on the commission, I championed the Third Ward Equity Fund. And one of the things that we did with those funds was something that's keep people in their home. And we were trying, because what we know for sure is that housing in our country is pretty unattainable in a lot of different locations, and Grand Rapids is one of those places. And so keeping people in the homes that they're already in helps people to not be unhoused, but it also helps them to not end up in the cycle of trying to find housing. And so we utilize some funding to see how can we make sure that people stay in their homes. And then I think the other piece is diversifying our housing stock. Is just make sure that when you're addressing housing, because it's a really complex issue, and it's one of the things that I've been working on, for about 10 years as a commissioner, and changing policies so that we can attract developers to build in our city, to be able to build affordable housing. And so what we need is a combination of affordable housing, some missing middle, because we have working people who aren't able to get housing themselves. And so what happens to them is, to David's point about the tip of the iceberg, what happens to them kind of down the road if they aren't able to get housing while they have a job, then they too can start the couch surfing and then ultimately end up in homelessness. Because we have seen an influx of people who are unhoused, and in the Black community, specifically in Grand Rapids. A younger demographic in Grand Rapids is increasing in being unhoused. And in addition to that, families. As I was partnering and working and connecting with GRPS, we've also partnered with other school districts where we know that they're doing their best to try to provide shelter to and food for those who are unhoused. So those are just a few additional things that around the topic of those who are experiencing homelessness.
Okay, thank you, Senita. The next question will go to you, Senita. And again, something we've talked about, just your stance in working with GRPD and influencing criminal justice reform in Grand Rapids.
Yes, so I think in my intro I mentioned that it was a violent act that took place near one of our elementary schools that kind of called me into the interest of serving and at the city level. And as soon as I got to City Hall in 2014, we launched a task force called Safe Alliances for Everyone. at the end of it, we did some research across the nation to look and to search things that a city can do to reduce violence in its city. What came out of that is a number of violent prevention reduction suggestions, recommendations. And within that is community and police relations. Safe in its task force has for years included grassroots organizations that are working directly with those who are perpetrating and victims of violent acts, as well as the prosecutor and the police department. And what we have found is that bringing people, from a variety of backgrounds to one table has helped us to work across sectors to address the issues of violence. And so, and to increase police and community relations. In addition to that, within the recommendations, we talk about the police department instituting its own strategic plan that is community driven and that would be created with the community in mind. I was an advocate for that, and Chief Payne was the one who eventually established a strategic plan, and Chief Winstrom has continued that strategic plan. And one of the elements within it is the neighborhood police model. And I believe that if they were to implement the neighborhood policing model fully, which is having assigned officers to assigned neighborhoods in the city, it affords those police officers to build relationships with the people who live in that city and the people who in that community, and neighborhood, and the people who live there to forge relationships with the same officers, so that in the end that there is a challenging crises that may be above them, they will already have an established relationship because they are familiar with officers who are policing them and familiar with the people they are policing. And I believe that that's one of the things, if it's implemented across the city, that really we will see a reduction or an increase in positive police community relations and a reduction in negative police and community relations.
Thank you, Senita. I know, David, you talked about this topic as well in terms of your own work in the criminal justice space, but I'd just like to extend the question out to you if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, so this is a big topic, and it really is my life. So we could talk about it for the rest of the day. But there are a lot of things that have to happen. There are things that have to happen at the state level that I absolutely intend to keep working on. I worked for 7 years to try to fix cash bond in Michigan. Those bills are still pending. Michigan sentences people twice as long as the national average, and I worked for the entire year of 2023 to get a sentencing commission established in Michigan. It's through the House. If you want to bug your state senators, if that gets through the Senate, we have the capacity to cut MDOC in half. And long sentences break families apart. So there are lots of things that have to happen in the criminal justice space to make things better. But at the local level on policing, again, complexity here, but just let me name some issues. So community policing is something we've been talking about for decades, and it's a good model, and everybody gets the vision. We were talking about it back when I was on commission in 2009. So there's no doubt that it's a good idea to have officers assigned to specific areas and to have them know the community members. The question is, given where we are now, what do we need to do now, and how can we do better? And there, I think we've got issues of staffing. We got issues of training, we got issues of leadership, and we have issues of policy. And the final one probably is, where do the police officers live? We all remember the images from Ferguson. My favorite one was an image from Ferguson and an image from Batman. And when every cop in the world is on the bridge in the Batman movie, and they both look basically the same. Police as an occupying army is a horrific model that we have to move away from. Now, GRPD has done some real progress here. The Department of Defense every year has a garage sale and they give away stuff. And last time I checked, the Kent County sheriffs had taken a tank as well as a bunch of night vision goggles and sniper rifles, and GRPD took bandages. I'm okay with taking bandages from the Department of Defense, but we do not need, we got to move away from, like I said, a policing model that's coercion and domination. I literally talked to a guy at the door yesterday, spent my last 15 minutes with him. He came home from work at 1:30 in the morning. He was followed by the police. They had a warrant for medical bills, a failure to show on a medical bill hearing. They pulled him over and he wound up badly beaten and knocked out. That's a really, really bad result to start with a financial issue. It shouldn't ever have gone there. There are pieces that need to be taken apart in there, like how do you get a warrant for bad medical bills? That shouldn't even be a category. That's a financial issue. It's also a civil issue. But also then, like, when that encounter starts, do people have a right to reasonably not be dragged out of their car? Well, I think the answer to that is yes. Another question, and Ann Arbor started on this, they got rid of, some of you may know, some of you may not know, there's a category called a pretext stop that we talk about in law. So a pretext stop is, imagine you had a cracked taillight and you're driving home and everything else is fine. You don't have any warrants, you got insurance, you got your driver's license, you got your registration, everything's fine. At the end of that encounter, what does the cop do? He gives you a repair and report ticket, right? He lets you drive your car home. So he didn't think your car was so dangerous because of that cracked tail. He didn't go call a wrecker. You weren't driving down the street with 3 wheels. So the reason that he pulled you over is a pretext for them doing all the other things that follow in line from that. I really wanted to get a bill to stop pretext stops in Lansing. Ann Arbor already instituted a policy of no pretext stops. I think we absolutely need to do that in the city. So there are questions of policy, because when you're talking about disparate impact in the system, the police are where the justice system starts. So how those encounters go, how those policies are written. Now, I also had a conversation with Sheriff LaJoy Young, who said, our standard training is if you touch somebody, they better wind up in cuffs. There's no incentive in our current training systems for de-escalation. So if an encounter is going sideways, police should be rewarded for walking away, stepping back. So the examples I use are, there was a Supreme Court case that said in the 80s that said you can't shoot after a fleeing felon. Because it's not a good idea to be spraying bullets around the community if you're chasing somebody who wrote a bad check. And so the Supreme Court fixed that one. Police departments over the last 10 or 15 years have realized high-speed chases for low-stakes things are a really bad idea, because you can run over community members going 100 miles an hour down Eastern Avenue while you're trying to get somebody for a speeding ticket. Shouldn't do it. So good police departments have stopped doing that. Not all of them have stopped. Detroit hadn't stopped yet last time I checked, but good police departments have policies against high-speed chases for low-stakes situations. So those kinds of policies need to be drilled down through our policing practices. And the good news is Chief Winstrom gets this, so this is not a criticism of him, but there's work to be done here.
Okay, thank you. Just as a follow-up question, while we're on the discussion of criminal justice reform, working with GRPD, just can each of you take just a few minutes, a minute or two, talking about reducing the number of guns and gun violence within the city limits? I'll let Senita go first and then have David go next.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. This sports, we've had a number of gun amnesty programs where we've invited the public to turn in their weapons, for gift cards and things of that nature that were either sponsored by SAFE itself or other community partners. What we have found is that I'll say it this way: we gave out gift cards based on different tiers of weapons. And so we found that though we didn't get the majority of the guns that we would have wanted to have removed, there were some that came in, and any gun that shouldn't be on the streets and that off the streets, we were happy to report that that was the outcome of that. I think that's just one way to reduce, but I really think that it's tied to education. When I think about education, and then um, for those who are gun owners who have license to carry and have their guns, if they are not locking those guns up, if they are allowing their guns to be in homes of people who may not have the mental capacity that they should have to, use a gun, if we do not have our state legislators having the right, and even the federal legislators having the right policies in place to make sure that the right checks happen, because these aren't the things that a local municipality would do. It's hard to say kind of what we have control over, but awareness is one of the biggest, I think, pulpits that a local government has, is to make sure that the community understands how guns are within our community. We talk about those in our public safety committee often, so that people will know. Our neighborhood associations are fully aware. We communicate with them regularly because they also have a mission of helping to keep our community safe. Because we have crime prevention coordinators in a number of our neighborhood associations. So we're sharing this information so that people will know what's happening, and then the education can then occur with families who are able to carry guns, but don't necessarily know how to keep them safe. Or I shouldn't say they don't know, they're not taking it seriously enough, because there are so many guns that are stolen from vehicles, so many guns that are stolen from homes, as well as then, family members who get access to guns that they shouldn't have. And we're seeing as a result in our schools, when we have these mass shootings, that's exactly how those people have gotten a hold of many of those guns, is because of gun owners not taking care of them the way they should.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, well, I am, I think, probably a lot more radical on this than Senita is. I think that guns are a huge problem in America, and I don't think that it's simply a matter of telling people to keep their guns safe. I think that's a massively inadequate response to the situation. I think that, frankly, the Second Amendment is facially invalid. It reads as a logical syllogism that says, because a well-regulated militia is necessary for the continuity of a free republic, therefore we need guns. Well, we decided to have a standing army 200 years ago. We don't have well-regulated militias keeping the peace in the United States of America. I am, as some of you may know, maybe not all of you, I'm endorsed by Moms Demand Action. This has been a big issue for me. I will do absolutely everything I can to advocate at every level of government for real laws that really restrict guns. The other thing that I'm doing, and this is I had a moment of clarity on this about 2 years ago, and I thought, Mothers Against Drunk Driving managed to make a cultural shift happen on drinking and driving. When I was young, there was a phrase, one for the road. That sounds psychotic now. Nobody would go to a bar and say, hey, I'm about to go get in the car. Can you please give me more alcohol, right? The idea that you would drink because you're going to drive sounds crazy. That's because MAD managed to have a cultural shift now there. Now, one of the things they did was they pointed to the cost. They pointed to the bodies. They pointed to the corpses. When I was thinking about this, I thought, all right, so nobody changes their mind because you're mad at them, and people only change their minds if they feel loved, safe, and accepted. So how do I talk about guns and use the language of love? So I wrote down 10 proposed bumper stickers on the issue, and I ran them by my colleagues in the legislature, and I came up with my top 2, and I printed them. And if any of you want them, you can go to the website, davidlegrand.com, we'll send you one. The one I have on my car says, guns kill people you love, because that is a true statement. The other one says, guns turn arguments into tragedies.
I was in front of my headquarters a couple years ago, and I parked my car, and a guy had thought that he was planning on parking in the spot that I parked in, and he got mad. And I thought, well, this is a teachable moment. I offered to move my car, but I was like, can we acknowledge that I didn't steal a spot from you? I just parked here. I'll move my car if you want. And he got angrier and angrier. And then he said, I feel threatened. And I thought, oh my gosh, this guy's going to make a stand your ground defense. And he reached into the console of his truck and he pulled out a 9mm. And I backed out into the middle of Kalamazoo because I thought, well, if I'm going to get a hole blown in me, at least I want some witnesses. So a semi truck screeched to a halt. The guy sort of realized that there were more eyes on him, ran, ditched the gun, and didn't get caught with a gun on him, unfortunately. But guns are that pervasive, right? They're in people's cars, and that leads to the cycle of like, how do you make policing better and safer? Well, if we got hypersaturation of guns everywhere, we're putting our officers in a really crappy position where they don't know what's in the car. And there's a reasonable expectation that people are going to be like that guy who pulled a gun out of his console when he was talking to me. So gun saturation is a huge issue, but I honestly think we got to stop hoping politicians will solve this problem, and we got to start owning it as individuals and work on a cultural shift. And I think that the most important thing we can all do is name it. I've never seen, other than the ones I printed, an anti-gun bumper sticker. I see lots of God, guts, and glory on pickup trucks with AK-47s and the Michigan mitten with a 9mm in it. And like, everyone's got pro-gun bumper stickers. I don't see any bumper stickers saying, enough already. Can we stop killing people? Like, why do we want to put up with this? Why do we want to live in a society that looks like this? It's actively not sane. It looks like mental illness to me, how we deal with guns in America. So it's an issue I'm very urgent on. It's true that we can't, because there have been some crappy Supreme Court decisions, we can't, make Grand Rapids a handgun-free zone. There are lots of things we can't do. But one thing we can do is name the problem, be clear about it, be courageous about it. And I always tell, if I ever represent a client who gets caught with a gun, I say, look, I own a bulletproof vest. Because I was in Lansing when the guys with long guns tried to storm out of the rotunda into our chambers. Next day, I bought myself a bulletproof vest. I've had a number of credible death threats. That means I wear a vest. That doesn't mean I go get a gun. And I explain this to young men all the time, like, gun does not make you a man. And if you tell me you need protection, go get a vest and I'll respect that response. I'm not respecting a gun as a response to fear.
Thank you. Thank you, David. And we did drop websites for each one of you into the chat. So I'm just going to remind folks, if you want one of those bumper stickers, as well as, kind of to learn about each of your platforms, you can go to the website. And if you're interested, and if you haven't heard of Moms Demand Action, quick Google search, and you can pull up that organization as well as getting involved in whatever level of advocacy feels the most comfortable. So last kind of question in this field of criminal justice, violence, guns in our city is, if you guys, each of you, want to take a minute or two again to talk about domestic violence within the city of Grand Rapids. I know recently a domestic violence court was started, I believe at the county level, but just wanted to get your stance on how you can partner with that court, as well as advocate and support for better ordinances, support to eliminate domestic violence in the city. We've had recently a number of tragic murders in the city involving domestic violence. And so like housing and being unhoused is a very pervasive issue within the city too. So I'll let David go first on this one and then move to Senita.
Yeah, thanks. So first of all, before I went to the legislature, I worked with a number of therapists in town on trying to develop, for decades, there's been a young adult sex offender treatment program in our courts. And I implemented and got funding for a program that has a therapeutic response for folks between the ages of 17 and 24. The amazing results, we just got from Chris Becker, the first 3 years results from that group. And I actually started crying. Of the more than 100 people through that court, none of them have reoffended, which is amazing. So these treatment programs are really the way to go, and treatment courts are the way to go. When I lecture on this, I sometimes say the problem with our current system is we have a failure-based system. So we wait for you to make a mistake and then we smash you for making the mistake. Instead, we need a success-based system. And so traditional probation officers can be like, haha, you missed your appointment. If you go watch a specialty court, it looks like life coaching. The judge is all of a sudden on the sides of the people in the court. They're like, "Hey, Bill, you made it another week without using drugs. That's great. How's the job search going?" And they're just all positive, forward-facing, success-based programs. Now, the thing about I actually was one of two members in the Kent County prosecutor that prosecuted domestic violence for a couple of years. That was how I ended my career as a prosecutor. Was pretty much full-time working in domestics, and it's a very thorny, tricky issue. It's also, because I'm a restorative justice guy and I've worked for decades in the restorative justice space, one of the things I always point out is RJ doesn't work very well in domestic violence situations because RJ assumes that an encounter between the victim and the offender is going to be good. It's not going to solve a domestic violence dynamic. So RJ is not a universally applicable model. It's a really good model that works where it works, but it doesn't work everywhere. So it doesn't work in domestic violence cases, but you can do RJ adjacent things. So a specialty court's great. The other thing you can do is have victim proxies to holding those folks accountable. But it's absolutely true that a therapeutic model is going to be critical if you're dealing with long-term entrenched objectifying the victim thinking on the part of offenders. And so it's something that I spent a lot of my life working in. I'm excited that we're starting to use the program. And at the end of the day, all of these specialty courts generate data, and you can track recidivism rates. And it's really kind of nice because you've often almost got a double blind situation where you can see what's happening to people who aren't in these specialty courts and people who are. And the result we want for the community is lower reoffense rates and lower offense rates. And so it's a great tool for that. And I'm really happy that it exists.
Thank you. Senita?
Thank you. Domestic violence court has been I think there's a really good start to that. And I think the data that we were seeing with the eviction court, I forget what there was a juvenile court that was specific for girls. What we're seeing with those specialty courts, I would agree with what David is saying, is that you get better results when I think everyone who's present is focused on addressing this issue. And so, I definitely would want to see that grow from out of pilot into something that would last long term. While serving on the commission, the Safe Alliances for Everyone Task Force, we funded a local nonprofit organization called Prietos Arbietas, I think. And their sole purpose and focus is to address domestic violence and to help victims to get the support and services that they need and to become advocates for themselves. And so I would want to see a little more funding to go to organizations like that and others who have a mission to address domestic violence. And then the last thing is, while serving on the commission, I was leading a human trafficking work group. And what we were also seeing some domestic violence that was happening with the human trafficking work group, where there were people who were connected to some of the victims of human trafficking, which makes it then domestic violence as well. And I would want to resurrect the human trafficking work group. It wasn't an official city work group as much as it was something that I was passionate about after learning of someone, a friend of mine whose daughter was trafficked for a weekend, and her life has not been the same. And so I would definitely want to put something in place to address human trafficking, which also encompasses some of the domestic violence. And what you will consistently hear from me is some very specific things about city-related outcomes and city-related processes, because that's the work of the mayor, is to focus on what can the city do specifically We have advocates who can go to Lansing to try to get those laws changed in Lansing, or try to get the laws changed at the federal level. But while those things are that advocacy is happening, and it typically takes a very long time, it's going to be vitally important to have local things that we're doing that are practical to keep people from being victimized as they're experiencing violence.
Thank you. Next question, and this came in the chat, so I want to make sure I'm asking that. Grand Rapids is home to 5 schools of social work. So we've got Grand Valley, we've got Western, has a Grand Rapids Extension, Calvin Cornerstone, and Kuiper. And Grand Rapids is a very growing city. What are your plans for retaining talent to this area? So as a side note, there is a major social work workforce shortage in the city in terms of significant openings, trying to find master's level social workers to take jobs in the city. So what are your plans? I'll start with Senita, for retaining talent to the area, as well as trying to reduce or eliminate student loan debt, because that also is a significant issue for lots of us social workers.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I think the Grand Rapids Public Schools has done well is to partner with organizations to build out what I would describe as kind of small high schools, small and themed high schools. And so, this could be potentially another small and themed high school. It could be housed with the other small and themed high schools in the Center of Innovation at Central High School, the Central High School campus. Because what I think is we have to encourage young people to consider some of the careers where we're having a shortage. We know we're having it with teachers. We know we're having it with policing. We know we're having it with social workers. And we're actually seeing it with so many other careers, because I think careers have just changed drastically. With the implementation of AI and some of the technology that exists now. And so, how do we help young people to become interested in some of these careers is exposing them to it. And I think that, we have a school and city liaison department in the city of Grand Rapids. It's called Our Community's Children. And so we do placement with students in the summertime to get them into different businesses and business sectors. And I would love to see us highlight some of the sectors where we are experiencing some deficits in attracting people into those careers, so that students become a little bit more familiar with what's a day in a life like to be a teacher or a social worker, or an administrator in a school, for an example. And I think those are ways that we can practically put something in place to help our community to see some of the careers where we're struggling with retaining talent. I think the other thing is what I've experienced in communities of color is when we have institutions that do not have representation that exists within them, then it's challenging to attract and retain people of color. So what you have is you'll attract someone to the community, but they don't stay long. If they can't get connected in the community culturally, which is why making sure our culture fits for everyone who's in Grand Rapids, because if they don't fit culturally, they leave. I know a number of young people who I've tried to convince and talk out of leaving, who have come here. They've gone to some of the schools that you just named, Laurie, and at the end, they're leaving. And so I think that's another way for us to make sure that we're retaining talent, is to be able to diversify the people who are in those positions now, and within the organizations that they are actually starting to work.
Thank you. David? You're muted, David.
Sorry, I'm trying to limit background noise. So yeah, it's absolutely true that we want to make Grand Rapids a diverse and welcoming place, and that's probably the most important thing we can do at the city level to keep people. Is I sometimes say in my businesses, the number one reason people work for you is not because you pay them. The number one reason people work for you is if they feel respected and valued. And so that's a broad question. At the city level, how do we make people who are doing this kind of work feel respected and valued? Well, there's some answers at the city level, there's some answers at the state level. And then there's, some of it is money, right? I mean, when I first started in GRPS school board, we had a 5-year pay freeze for teachers. And so we had 6-year teachers who were making $31,000 a year. Well, how long are you going to stick at a job with that kind of pay? And Republicans love to talk about the laws of supply and demand until they come to actually talking about paying people who are doing important work like social workers. So continuing to advocate for decent pay for these jobs, but also safety. So certainly a certain sector, and this is just a sector, but social workers who go work in the CPS system or for Bethany or Samaritas. We did a survey when I was in Lansing. The Auditor General did a survey of social workers doing work for DHSS in those space. 80% of them said at some point in their annual experience they felt unsafe. That's because we're sending people out into homes at night by themselves who are 22 years old into problematic situations. Well, again, I had a niece who was doing that work, and she quit after a couple of years because she just didn't want to go in a house at 9 o'clock at night by herself where she knew there was some dysfunction going on. And I can't really blame her. So making sure that that those jobs are supported in every meaningful way means people are going to, you can't blame people for not choosing jobs that don't look like they're worth doing or look like they're going to take too much personal cost. Now, student loan debt, I actually had a bill at the state level, didn't go anywhere, for people who stayed in Michigan to progressively forgive debt for teachers. It'd be a great idea to reintroduce that bill and include social workers. Again, I do think Mayor Duggan's a great example of a mayor who actually goes to Lansing and gets things done. They may not be the things I want to get done, but he is very effective at getting legislators to work on issues. I'm a lot more interested in working on justice issues however I can. And so I'm certainly going to continue to advocate at the state level for things like that. And then the other part of it is making Grand Rapids a fun city. I mean, you're not going to stay here if it doesn't look like it's a fun place to be, if it doesn't look like a place that has walkable neighborhoods, livable neighborhoods, multimodal transportation. So like social workers are kind of my canary in the coal mine, or maybe my best demographic for the kinds of people I want to keep in Grand Rapids. And they're folks who like the idea of like taking a bike to the farmer's market and not getting run over in the process. So all the things we could do to make Grand Rapids better, I think will help us retain the sorts of people that like walking places, that like biking places, that like living in vibrant neighborhoods. And so we got to make sure we keep supporting the neighborhoods. It's great that we got a great downtown, and downtown's not without its challenges, but cities are just a collection of neighborhoods. And if we can't make sure that all of our neighborhoods look like great places to live, we're not going to be succeeding as a city.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question, just kind of being respectful of time and making sure that we're out of here at 1:30, as well as giving you guys both opportunities to do one last pitch. I know both David and Senita, you've both talked about serving and working with the Grand Rapids Public Schools. And so I'll start, David, with you. Are you aware of just the concerns going on with dean transportation, the lack of transparency with the Grand Rapids Public School Board, and just your thoughts about how, understanding these are completely separate entities, but how the city, being a mayor of the city, can help work closely, collaboratively with the public schools. I think you guys have alluded to a lot of different ways that the school systems can be an integral part of the community support, as well as sometimes be that canary in the coal mine if communities are struggling. Schools can definitely be a big indicator of that. So starting with you, David, are you aware of kind of the concerns, the dean transportation, and just really this kind of lack of transparency that a lot of parents, and I will include myself in that, have with what is actually happening, as well as parents not feeling listened to by the school board, even by dean?
Yeah. So yes, I am aware of it. I mean, I understand there are some real problems at the schools right now, and this is a whole other topic. And thank you for pointing out, neither one of us is running for school board. We've done that work. The school board, of course, its primary job is to hold the superintendent accountable and to make sure the superintendent is implementing things. So the dean transportation thing, as some of you may know, is sort of a legacy problem because we privatized our transportation years ago. And it's something I wasn't happy about at the time, and I've ever since then been concerned, because the advantage of having people work for your system directly is that you can hold them directly accountable. And Republicans often, I'm sorry, people on the farther right than me often love talking about outsourcing and privatizing as though it's a miracle, it's a panacea. And one of the train wrecks we saw around here was they privatized all the workforce in the veterans home, and the place fell apart. And the average worker went from being there for years to being there for about 180 days. They slashed wages. They paid a bad wage, and they didn't wind up with continuity. Well, if a bus driver sees their job as a vocation, and they see themselves as in a relationship with those kids over a long period of time, you're going to have a different dynamic than if you are hiring people for really substandard wages, and you've privatized it. So don't want to get too far down that road. I just wanted to make that point. As far as accountability in the schools, I will give you what's maybe a shockingly raw political answer to this, but it's true. I back in the day became convinced that Superintendent Taylor was not doing a good job running GRPS. And he had at that point a supportive board. And my grim joke about Taylor was that other than students and parents and teachers, he liked his job. I, at that point, first I recruited Tony Baker to run for school board against an incumbent. And I sat these folks down and I said, look, I know you've never been in politics before. I know you don't know how to run a race, but I can help you do this. We can develop literature. We can find people to walk with you. We need people with talent, with understanding of education and curriculum on the school board. So first I recruited Tony Baker, who's got a PhD and teaches at Ferris. Then I recruited Wendy Fall. I recruited John O'Connor. And I recruited, so the first cycle, we two incumbents left and two new people got on. The second cycle, another two people got on who were good and qualified, who I had recruited. Third cycle, we got number 5 and number 6 on, and then basically the next day Taylor quit because he could see what was happening, but he couldn't do anything about it. So at some point, the community simply has to make sure that there are good, talented people on the school board who are willing to hold a superintendent accountable. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of the current superintendent's performance. I'm not. But what I am saying is any school system needs a well-functioning, talented school board in order to have a chance of running well and implementing things well and holding people accountable. And so for all of you who are listening, this coming school board election is really important. Do your homework, figure out the candidates who are, and look at their messaging and look at their background and look at where their values are, because expertise really matters. And you can see this in the corporate world all the time too. Look at Elon Musk's board at Tesla. They're a bunch of yes people. They just do whatever he asks. He says, I'd like $50 billion. And they're like, yeah, that sounds fine. So all the time in the corporate world, you get essentially corporate boards that are just rolling over for the executives. That's not how a board's supposed to work. It's not how a school board's supposed to work. It's not, and the city commission's not supposed to roll over, including the mayor, isn't supposed to roll over for the city manager for that matter. So, whether you have a city commission that thinks that the city manager really runs the city and it's just their job to give thumbs up and thumbs down on what the city manager wants to do, is not going to give you a great city commission either. So there are city commission races that everyone on this call is going to have to look at. Do your homework, look at those races, make your own decisions, but having people who have the intelligence and the autonomy and the integrity to be able to hold executives accountable is really, really important. So that's a raw political answer, but remember, I am not running for school board and I am not the school superintendent, but those principles are absolutely applicable.
And, I would add too, I mean, so much of what happens in the school is reflective of what's going on in the community. And so much of the things that kids, there's a lot of school social workers, throughout GRPS. And so, so much too, what's going on with kids and in families, I mean, has an impact not just on the school, but on the city, right? If you have parents that are unhoused, don't have
Oh, yeah.
access to work, or even just basic needs, right? That make
Yep.
schools
Oh,
struggle.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and this is old data, but I remember I got data once that showed that 30% of the kids at Union High School were going to have more than one address in the course of any given calendar year. Well, it's really hard to finish your homework if your homework's sitting on the corner getting rained on because you got evicted. So, like, eviction is a really, really important thing to address. And a lot of like, we do stressor scale tests for kids on things that are going on in their lives. And it's a depressingly accurate indication of their likelihood of being involved in the juvenile justice system. And so, like, things like childhood trauma, whether you're in a single parent household, whether there's domestic violence in the home, whether there's drug use in the home, all of those kinds of things can be real indicators, unfortunately, of worse outcomes down the road. So you're absolutely right. Amen.
Hey, Senita, I wanted to extend that question out to you. Happy to repeat it, just about the concerns with Dean Transportation, the school board. I understand those are two completely separate entities, but just how perhaps you as the mayor would work collaboratively with the school board, with the school system.
Yeah, and thank you for repeating it. I did hear it before I lost my connection. So thank you so much for repeating that. You know, I this is an interesting circumstance because I think it's indicative of community engagement. Frequently public institutions ask for input, but they're not receptive to the feedback that they're receiving. And what they then do is do whatever it is that they were going to do in the first place. And so in some ways, I can remember having this conversation at the city level. We were doing some engagement about water bills and water bill rates. And when we had this conversation, and when we were asking for public input based on the feedback we would get, it was too late to even make any changes to what we had established. So we reversed when we were asking for input. And I think this is what it boils down to is it's a listening thing. When you have parents with real examples of children not being dropped off in the right location, when you have children who have not been picked up, when you have all of these steps with the transportation services, it is important for the school district to own it, and it's important for Dean Transportation to own it too. Here's the challenge as I see it. Everybody is understaffed. We just talked about it in social work. And so I do recognize that part of the challenge could be, and what I'm hearing is that they are understaffed. And so as a result, there's a lot of substitution that happens with bus drivers. The very same thing is happening in classrooms. And as a parent of as a parent of GRPS children, I know that that isn't healthy for my children. And so if we just look at the tip of the iceberg, to continue with Dave's analogy, it's easy to say just do something, but it kind of boils down to what can be done systematically to address this issue with the resources that you have, with the staffing model that with the staffing numbers that you have. How can you create a staffing model that's going to yield the outcomes that children deserve? No child should be afraid to get on a bus, or no child should be left behind from not being able to get on a bus at any point. I take that very seriously. And I think one of the things that I am good at doing is listening. And I have had many of challenging conversations while serving as president of the GRPS. school board, and while serving as a commissioner and just a business owner in general, and working in corporate America, with having these crucial conversations and bringing together people who may have opposing views on issues to help them to come to a common solution. Parents want to be heard, and parents want a change to be made, and they owe it to all of us to tell us what can be done consistently, and then let parents make a decision about what they need to do with their children after that. If you cannot handle the load that you have of students in GRPS, they need to raise the flag and deem transportation to say, we can't handle the number of students any longer because we are understaffed. And then the district then would need to come up with what the right policies and practices should be to make sure that no child is in a position of being without transportation.
Thank you. Thank you. So just as we wrap, I'm just going to give you both a couple minutes to add any final thoughts, a pitch, what you maybe would like us to know as social workers that you haven't had a chance to talk about. Like I said, we did drop in the chat links to both of your websites. I also dropped in information about registering to vote, voting, in the city's offices, so you can look in terms of where you go, where's your precinct. August 6th, so that's Tuesday, right around the corner is the primary. So I'd encourage everybody, get registered, get out and vote. Local elections matter. So yes, I know we're marching towards a national election, but all these local elections really, really matter. And part of social work is being involved in the political system. So I just want to send that reminder out as well. I will start with you, Senita, if you want to give us just a couple minutes, final pitch, wrap up, and then move on to David.
Yeah, thanks again. As I started off first with opening remarks, I'll conclude with these. I am a candidate that's committed to the city of Grand Rapids. I have lived here since I was 9 years old. And for me, this role of mayor is an act of service for me. Being able to engage with the city to make sure that their voices are heard and their voices are brought to the table, to the city commission table, is important to me. One of the other things that I'd like to do is bridge the communication gap that has frequently existed between the mayor and the commissioners, or the mayor and the community. I want to be able to have a commission that thrives together, that not displacing anyone or anyone's opinions, but being able to help everyone to feel like they can come representing their respective communities at that table without being cut off, without being dismissed, but for us to all come and work together to find the common solutions. I am the only formerly elected official who is running on this for this race, who has completed every single term that I was elected to. And I think that that's important. I am committed. When I am elected, I'm committed. I'm committed to this city. I enjoy the roles that I have been elected to, from the school board and to the 3rd Ward City Commission. And I look forward to all of the communities that exist in Grand Rapids, being able to engage those community from block to boardroom, bringing those conversations together to make the best solutions for all voters. Again, visit my website, it's in the chat, senitaformayor.com, to learn more. You can email any questions that you may have as a follow-up to vote@senitaformayor.com, and we will definitely respond to it, because I want to hear feedback. Any other ideas that you may have, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, great conversation. Thanks so much for having this. I don't think you really need to hear anything more from me, but I will say there are 4 people running for mayor, and you've only heard from 2 of them. So without their permission, but with a little bit of grace, I want to at least highlight for you the other 2 people running. So Steve Owen is a young man who has some background in the appellate court system, federal appellate court system. He's currently working in the construction industry, and the chief issues that he has highlighted, at least in his literature, and you can go look up his website, are more frequent snow plowing, He wants to figure out how to do more affordable childcare. I haven't heard a lot of details, but that's a priority for him, he says. And then he's also suspicious of and probably not in favor of the amphitheater and the proposed soccer arena. So those are his principal issues, and you can go look him up. He's, I think, a good young man who's, you know, trying to work for the common good. So wanted to give his platform a little bit there. The fourth person running is an individual named Haley Lynch Bastian. Their pronouns are they, them. Haley lives in the Hartside area and I think has a real heart for that community and is really focused on drilling down and making sure that the underserved and those without a voice get heard. And I think that that's really laudable too. And I appreciate the fact that Haley is running. So just so you're all aware, and sorry, I'm a little itchy on this, but WZZM the other day did a news story and they only gave 2 of the 4 of us actual TV time, and they put the other 2 on a web program. Like, 4 people are running. Anybody in America has a right to run for anything, and they should get equal coverage. So whatever reasons they couldn't be here, they are both viable candidates. I'm glad that they're running, and I at least wanted to give you a thumbnail sketch. You can certainly go to their websites to see more. You can contact them to find out more, and I'm not asking you to vote for them, but I wanted to give them a voice. So thank you. Thanks again for having us.
And I will send out links to all 4 candidates with the recording of this the Zoom meeting. In full transparency, I did invite all 4 people. Mr. Owens was not able to attend, and then Haley was invited, but I'm not sure why they were not able to attend. But with the email from this recording, I'll put links to all of that. I did, Senita, drop the email you gave me into the chat. So if somebody wants to reach out, ask questions, or even volunteer, participate in any way, is there a good email for you, David, that I can drop in the chat?
I think just davidlegrand.com gets you to the website. My personal email, if anybody ever wants, or Tiana just put up the, because Tiana runs my life. I work for her. She doesn't work for me. But if anybody wants my email for future reference, my personal email is simply davidlegrand@gmail.com. So I don't keep that secret. And if anybody wants my phone number, it's 616-540-0994. Thanks again, everybody.
All right. And I'm trying to get that into the chat as we talk. You said at Gmail?
Yeah. And Tiana, you can throw in my cell phone number if you want.
I think I might have actually just edit with the E.
Oh, you put an E on the end. Yeah. Did you take French in high school? If anybody who ever took French is going to spell it wrong. Okay.
Okay. I did Spanish, just kind of close.
Feminine beginning, masculine ending. So, you know, it's not grammatical.
Okay.
It should be, it should have an E on the end, but it doesn't.
Okay. Okay. I apologize for that. Again, thank you, David and Senita, for meeting with everybody, for just allowing, I know there's a lot of questions. We didn't get to every single one of them, but just to be able to have this opportunity and space for social workers to ask questions, and, you know, as well as to get your stances on some very real, complicated, you know, dynamic social issues going on within the city. I too have been in this area all of my life, so pretty familiar with the area. I've seen it grow and change in a lot of different ways, both personally and professionally. So I just really appreciate you guys have taken this time. And we are 1 minute past, so I do want to quickly wrap up because I know everybody has busy lives. Thank you very much, and look for the recording in an email. Have a great weekend and day.
Thank you so much.
Take care.